every single person wants to do well. Like at a baseline, like everyone wants to accomplish something in every given day. I truly believe that.
Welcome everyone to the Momentum Elite Sport to Business podcast. Today we have a very special guest, someone who has just started a brand new role. Today we have Dan Hannigan-Daley. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So Dan, you are the CEO of Sports Info Solutions. You just started a role recently. Before that, you spent over 5 years at the famous DraftKings. I'm sure we'll jump into that and a lot of the sports betting side of things. You graduated from Brock. You played university Varsity Soccer. So you are a Canadian. Shout out to Canadians. And
go Team Canada Soccer as well. Yeah,
and soccer. And tons of sports, tons of business, tons of betting. Let's jump into it. So Dan, walk everyone through what is keeping you so busy today. I know you're a busy man to get a hold of.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I recently left DraftKings. I was there for 5.5 years, saw the organization grow from 200 people to 3,500 people, from tens of millions in revenue to billions in revenue. Pretty crazy trajectory. But yeah, I'm enjoying my time thus far at Sports Info Solutions, learning a lot on the job. And what's really keeping me the busiest is recruiting, looking to build an exceptional organization here, augment the existing talent base that we have, and then, understanding the marketplace more so and looking to forge potential partnerships, collaborate with a bunch of different organizations that are out there, the sports data, the analytics industry. When you marry that onto sports betting as well, it's obviously a pretty exciting, accelerating area of opportunity. So there's lots of startups, lots of existing businesses looking to accelerate their growth, of which we are sort of a part of. And so, yeah, keeping really busy there, having lots of interesting conversations, a lot of talented individuals in the space, but hopefully we're able to make our mark.
Awesome. So I think for everybody who's listening and watching, can you provide a bit more background on what it is that you do at SIS?
Yeah, for sure. So Sports Info Solutions is a really interesting, innovative business, quite frankly. So John Dewan and Bill James founded the organization, John Dewan specifically, in the early 2000s. Effectively, this is the organization that started the Moneyball trend. So it was actually initially Baseball Info Solutions, and the niche was specifically capturing really deep data sets and then providing insights and analysis to professional sporting organizations. The first version of that was the Oakland Athletics, and then moved on to offering really robust data sets across all levels of baseball. So not just Major League Baseball, but collegiate baseball, minor league baseball, and then we have MPB, the KBO, do a little bit on the Caribbean leagues as well. Basically anywhere where there might be exceptional levels of baseball being played, we capture that data and then disseminate that data across to many different interested bodies, predominantly Major League Baseball teams. We more recently launched a football arm as well. That was in 2016. So we do a very similar process, collecting really deep data sets for college football and the National Football League. The majority of our clients for that data are National Football League teams as well, unsurprisingly, but also just because of how popular football is generally, and especially as it pertains to the deeper data and its usefulness for media entities and also for those within the betting arenas. We have some clients, ESPN, SimpleBet, for our college football data as well. And then another really exciting area of the business that only launched just over a year ago is our basketball division. So we're quite fortunate and lucky to have a guy named Jake Louse, who was the director of analytics for the Phoenix Suns, running the team there. We have a really robust NBA draft product, effectively, that we're capturing pretty much every single data point you could imagine for around the top 100 prospects, and then distributing that to it's a finite number of teams. Obviously, only so many NBA teams are really interested in at least the top level of the NBA draft. But we're looking to expand our basketball operations quite considerably to effectively mirror what we do on the football and baseball side. Obviously, where I fit in is figuring out the best extensions of that data into a consumer marketplace, and then also to sports betting operators as
Oh,
well.
amazing, amazing. That's a lot of great progress, and I'm sure you're going to be doing great things. How crazy is it, Dan, that now we're talking about data even in the draft, and maybe when you played soccer, when I played football in college, it wasn't that long ago, there wasn't that much talk about data. I think we've come a long way as an industry across all the sports industry or organizations.
Yeah, it's been remarkable to witness, and I would say um, even some of the existing major professional sports leagues and some of the teams within it are still fairly slow to adopt a really
Wow.
sort of robust data set to figure out how they want to make decision making or make decisions on the field of play or in the front office as well. But the acceleration, especially the last 2 or 3 years, has been absolutely exceptional. I think that's in part due to pretty strong advancements in technology, specifically like at the league level themselves. So MLB with StatCast and NFL with their next gen stats as well. That's provided a lot of additional data and insight, and almost like consumerized some of the data as well. That's made it a little bit more mainstream. And you can go on, I guess tools like Twitter probably help this as well. Like you can go on Twitter and there's hockey analytics or soccer analytics or basketball analytics, like threads on Twitter that are absolutely fascinating, and some really incredible minds that are breaking down the sport in ways that 5 years ago, frankly, wasn't even a possibility. And so groups like SIS and some of our competitors as well are really looking to just continue accelerating that and taking a data-driven approach. It's not too unlike, I suppose, how general business has evolved quite considerably. Like if you're not harnessing the power of data, you're undoubtedly falling behind if you haven't already.
And I think the people realize the ROI is there. I think it wasn't quantifiable before, but now you have enough data to show that, hey, if you spend X, you get Y.
Exactly. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and also from a data standpoint, once you do start using data, I think what I used to think was every league or every team in a league when I was younger has the exact same access to all the different things. If you're in the NFL, every team should be having the best players. They should have the same protocol. They should have the same technology. But I think the more you learn about it, every team is different, and not every team is using all the great things that you can. So I think that's something that even you're seeing people are adapting more, but there still are some teams that are making decisions based off gut feel, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah, and it's really interesting. What I would say is like there's sort of a happy medium as far as like using the quantitative and the qualitative data. I mean, like there's a reason why some of these experts in their field have risen the ranks and become whatever head coaches or GMs, or they're part of the front office of their professional organization. Like they do know what they're doing. Obviously, it's figuring out the best way to marry the data into how they're operating. You can validate some of the qualitative opinions through data, or you can find differences in opinion through doing actual analysis of the quantitative versus the qualitative. And that's where I think we really start to shine. And what's actually been really interesting for me coming in, and I knew a little bit about this in some regards, but there are incredible differences amongst organizations. So, some organizations will have a team of 15 data analysts, and they just want our data, raw, uncut.
They do all the work.
They do what they want. It's all proprietary for them. Whereas others, they might have 1 or 2 people. So they actually really need more tools and insights, and they want us to tell them, when this player's at bat and the count is this, you should shift this way. And they want to know that exact information, which is pretty interesting. So obviously different groups are investing differently in the space, but I think now we're pretty much at the point anyways, where all organizations know like we need to have a more robust set of data to help inform our decision-making process in some capacity.
I think it's almost following the same path you see a lot of businesses that are not sports businesses take, where they would build their technology before, but now it's become so cheap. Somebody has done it really well that you're like, you know what, I don't have to hire 15 people. I'll just take what you have because it does the job. So I think you're seeing a lot of that. You don't need 15 analysts anymore because you have folks like you guys that tell you exactly what you need to know to make better decisions and win more games.
Exactly. And it's not like we're becoming the Shopify or anything, but it's sort of similar to how Shopify has sort of driven so many retail businesses to go to e-com because, the lift is fairly low and the quality is still high.
Exactly. Dan, walk me through your life growing up. How did you end up on this path you're on today? Where did it start? How did you like to end up soccer? How do you go to Brock? Walk me through all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I grew up in Oakville, Ontario, a suburb of Toronto. I don't know how it became to be, but I was always a sports nut. I would do nothing but sports basically from the time I was, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, whatever it might be. That was all I really wanted to do. I think it was around the '94 World Cup specifically. Like I just absolutely fell in love with soccer as a sport. The '93 Leafs playoff run made me fall in love with hockey, and from then on there was basically no turning back. I was very fortunate in that, my parents were incredibly supportive. So I got enrolled in pretty much every sport that you could imagine.
That's
And
amazing.
as opportunities were presenting themselves, as far as like joining travel teams and whatnot, I was able to do that. And, I credit my parents a lot. Obviously, they were very disciplined and organized and were able to get me around to all of the fields of play that I needed to get to. So from the age of basically 10, I was playing like the top level soccer and the top level hockey in the province. So with that came a pretty busy schedule. I also have a twin brother, so that added some chaos to the mix, which I'm sure was
Identical
fun
identical
for my
twins.
parents. Pardon me?
Identical twins.
He's not identical. No, he probably couldn't be less like me. In fairness, he's a PhD mathematician. Didn't really like sports, which is kind of funny. I was all about it. So yeah, we had competing interests, but we were both able to do what we love to do, which was obviously great. And so I played competitive soccer and hockey all the way up until I was about 16, 17, and then played all the sports in high school, captained a bunch of the teams there, played with my friends, had a great time doing all of that. And in and around that age range rather, is when we'd go on various trips as a soccer team down to the States to check out different schools and whatnot, see if there's a fit to go down south and get a scholarship and whatnot. Had a couple offers, was kind of interesting, but nothing really amazing to me. And then I took one trip to Brock, and at the time, this would have been 2003, 2004. There weren't a lot of sport management programs, at least not that I could recall, that were really obvious anyways. I think like Acadia and Brock in Canada had them.
Even right now, I think Brock is still a leader. You always hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, as soon as I got to the campus at Brock and, heard more about the program, I was like, this is an absolute no-brainer. Like, I want to work in sports. There's no two ways about it. I'll get the chance to play hockey, play junior B hockey while I was at school, and then also play for the varsity soccer team. It just seemed like an absolute no-brainer. It was going to be really busy, but still was close enough to home. I like the idea of the fact that there was an internship involved with the program as well. And yeah, so
you played
the decision to go to Brock and played soccer while I was there, as mentioned, and just had a blast. It was great.
So you played 2 sports in university? You're a 2-sport athlete?
Yeah, it was pretty nuts. My first year I didn't. I basically took a year off hockey. I mean, I played whatever intramurals and whatnot. But my second year, a bunch of my friends from Oakville, who I played hockey with, happened to be going to play for a team called Port Colborne Sailors, Junior B there.
Yep.
And yeah, they told me to come out for a skate. I went out for a skate, liked it, and I was able to sort of set up a decent arrangement where I could join the hockey team after Canadian Thanksgiving. So like mid-October, once we were kind of halfway through the soccer season, and would do both for a period of time, and then obviously switch over solely to hockey once the soccer season ended. And did that for 2 years and loved it. It was great. I was obviously really busy. So, maybe partied a little bit less than others, which is probably a good thing in hindsight. But yeah, absolutely loved it. As I mentioned, it's absolute sport nuts. So it was great to get that opportunity to play hockey with a bunch of buddies as well at a decent level, not a crazy high level. And then also travel around Ontario with the Brock soccer team, which we had a pretty successful team as well. It was great fun.
I'm sure you have a lot of great memories. What allowed you to stay focused with all this crazy amounts of work? I know you still have to, go to school and go to class as well. That's another 40, 50 hours a week. So what allowed you to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the fact that from a really early age, it was sort of ingrained into me that you just kept busy. Like you would play all of the sports and do, in school was always sort of not forced upon me. That's the wrong word, but it was always, shown to be really important. Like having good grades was really essential. I went to a French immersion school as well. So we're learning French and English and playing all the sports. It was busy. So honestly, my first year when I wasn't playing hockey and just soccer, I was like, I got too much free time on my hands. This is kind of weird. Like I like to, if you can't tell, I'm a high energy guy. I like to keep busy and keep active and continuously progress and learn new skills and all of that fun stuff. And so, really those couple of years at Brock, it was like going back into old habits in some capacity. And one thing that I definitely stress this to folks I talk to who are looking for advice and whatnot, it's really, really important to surround yourself with individuals who are of similar mindset or at least of similar sort of drive and want to accomplish really great things. And I was fortunate, like the house that I lived in at Brock lacrosse players, other hockey players, other really, really great students and whatnot. And sort of being in that environment made it sort of normal to be busy and working hard. And you work hard, you play hard and all that fun stuff as well. So it wasn't as difficult as maybe it could have been, looking back on it anyways.
What I remember from my time playing football is I actually did better when I was busy because you had less time to, not take it as this is the only time I have. So if you have less time, you almost spend the best you can during those chunks of hours. The moment the season ended, I was like, you know what? Well, I have no practice tonight, so I got 6 hours. I'll study. Right. When I get there, but you end up doing less work because you just are not forced, it's not forced, but again, you're not forced to do things because you're not on the clock. If you're busy, you got to go to practice, you got to go, you got to go work out, you got to go to class, you got to go eat something. That keeps you on your toes, which means you are using your time more wisely, spending it on the areas that are going to maximize ROI, which I think is so important in business because you only have so many hours in a day and you can't do everything. So I, would love to understand from you, how did you know what to spend your time on specifically to maximize the ROI? Because you can't be perfect. You just cannot be perfect in today's world.
Right. And I think you make a really good point there. Where it's really easy to get complacent if you allow yourself to do so. And I would say definitely it was a challenge for most of the world anyways, about a year ago when everything was locked down. You're like, I got all this time. I don't want to work all the time. What am I going to end up doing? You end up sort of falling off the rails, or you can anyways fall off the rails if you're not really, really guided or specific around what you want to do. I would say for myself now, and I've also got a new son in the mix, just born 3 months ago. So still pretty young, still not sleeping a huge amount. And so what it means is that now my time is even more valuable, I would say. And so it's really, really important to be as efficient as possible. Like you mentioned, you're not going to be perfect with your time by any stretch of the imagination, but being very explicit with, what are your goals for this day or this week or this month, and making sure that you're making progress towards the most important things. You're delegating where you can possibly delegate, throwing things away when they're not important. Like that to me is incredibly valuable. And it's always a work in progress. I mean, I'm still sort of tuning all of that. We all are by the day, even the most successful people in the world, they're still tuning that. No one's perfect, but I think that's the most important thing is like actually having a set of goals and making sure you're holding yourself accountable to those and not getting distracted by all of the noise. Cause there's a lot of noise for sure. Especially with this guy, there's a lot of
more
noise.
And more. I was going to say more and more every year. More and more noise every year. Now, talking about not being perfect, Dan, I always like to ask this question because I believe there's a really strong learning underneath. Talk about failure, how you failed, how do you handle failure in your life? I'm sure, your LinkedIn looks amazing, but I'm sure it hasn't been always a steady upward climb, right? So walk us through failure. How do you handle failure?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, I don't even really deem a lot of things as failure because effectively they're learning opportunities. I mean, on the field of play, you can say, I lost this game, I failed in that moment. And a lot of folks will sort of contextualize it that way. But if you sort of change the dynamic and think about it as a learning opportunity, then you're able to yield value from that. And, like you mentioned, there were speed bumps that occurred across my path to getting to where I was. I mean, when I was even leaving Brock as an example, I was supposed to get an internship, or you're meant to get an internship as part of the program. Had one lined up with Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, which would have been cool, would have kept me at home. But for whatever reason, I was like, I got to get out of here. I want to go overseas and go to the UK and witness life over there. I knocked on all the doors of all the Premier League clubs, Scottish Premier League clubs, and even lower than that, and basically got nothing. And so, you could deem that as a failure. But for me, I was like, this is an opportunity to just still go anyways and see what happens. And I was fortunate in that I was able to get into a program at the University of East London and continue studying, and then was able to knock on all the doors and finally got in with a company called BD Sport, working actually at White Hart Lane where Tottenham Hotspur play, and then sort of that led me on the path. Wow. But could have totally been like, oh man, this stinks. I'm just going to go back to Brock and study some more and see what happens from there. But I was pretty steadfast in not letting that quote unquote failure sort of hold me down and yield, take advantage of the opportunity. You need to have the right fortune, I suppose, to be able to take some of those jumps and risks and whatnot. And that was one of those sort of defining moments for myself. There's certainly a few others. There's lots of doors that you knock on that no one answers, and call that a failure, but you just keep knocking on doors. It's fine.
Keep going.
Nobody's perfect anyway.
I call it execution, right? Look, anytime, let's in the tech world, something fails, I think it's all about learning from it, making your product better, and keep going back. So it's not failure. And the way I look at it is, it's like there's micro failures that adjust your path. So for you knocked on a bunch of doors, you didn't get there. You're like, you know what? That's still my goal, but I'm going to go study a bit more so I can have easier access and get there at the end of my goal. So
nothing's linear.
Exactly. So you got to figure out, and I think a lot of times what happens is we get stuck on a certain path, we get tunnel vision. And I think that's where we start to say, hey, I failed. But I think if you can figure out things, be flexible, and you have the drive that you had coming out of Brock, and you still have, I can tell, you will most likely be fine. It's just about keep getting back up, keep getting after it.
Totally. Yeah. And it's interesting because I talk to a lot of students and whatnot. And one of the things that I love to stress is, coming out of university, almost everyone or a vast majority anyways, are like, I want to go work for a professional organization. And these are the steps that I need to take. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. Sure, you can get in there early, but that might actually not be the best path. If your goal is to get up here in that organization, your path is probably over there and then over there and then over there. Exactly. And then you might want to zigzag a little bit more, and that actually going somewhere where maybe there's more opportunity to learn on the fly and actually have wear a bunch of different hats, as opposed to getting, not necessarily saying that a big organization will silo you, but that there's maybe less flexibility. In a lot of ways, it's better to go somewhere where your scope might be a little bit larger, maybe the stakes are a little bit lower, but that's great, especially early on.
Especially in your 20s, right? That's what I tell a lot of students as well. Like, don't worry about the title. Find out the manager you're working for. What are you learning? What are the skills you're getting right now? That's what it's about. So Dan, this is a great story. I would love to build on this. So you go to London, you get your education, and then you get in with this new group that you're working there. How do you then, I think at this point you probably transition out of sports, but how do your transition fully start into the business world? How do you get into the world of betting? How did the DraftKings stuff happen? So walk me through that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it was really interesting. I applied for a role as a betting cashier at Tottenham Hotspur, and basically the next day was able to literally take bets, and had no idea that this was even a thing. But as part of the service that's provided to folks that are going to Premier League clubs at that time, especially there was not the 5G Wi-Fi in the stadium, so you couldn't be betting on your phones or anything. It was all pen and paper. So we'd have a small army of betting cashiers located around the stadium. And it was one of those things where it was kind of right place, right time. I got in with the organization. They'd really just started in the UK, and a super interesting sort of business model whereby there were a lot of Asian bookmakers that wanted to advertise to potential clients, and due to gambling laws in Asia, they were not able to. So a workaround would be get on the shirt of a Premier League club, because there will literally be billions of people watching that match. And so you'll get a little bit of brand visibility. And as part of that, each of these online gaming partners for the Premier League clubs would need to offer wagering in the stadium. And so BD Sport sort of sought that opportunity and would be the in-stadium operations on behalf of these online brands. And then we would act as a super affiliate, sending folks online if they won their bets and whatnot. Anyways, it was a small operation when I started, just the 3 clubs. And by the time I left, we were at 24 clubs, and I was able to grow with the business alongside it, to the point where I, on my last year, was running all of the in-stadium operations across all of the stadiums or the clubs in London. So
you started,
Arsenal, Chelsea.
You started as an agent on the floor, and by the time you left, you were actually looking at operations as a whole. That's remarkable.
So I was one of the few full-time staff at the end of my foray there, and it was cool because we had 120 part-time staff across London that would work at all the different clubs there, and it was a great experience. And it was tough because it was a lot of evenings and weekends, as you might imagine. And oddly enough, I missed watching US sports while I was out there. So I took a night job, trading for Ladbrokes, which is a sportsbook there. And so really got deep in the mix. Didn't sleep a lot, didn't see a lot of people outside of work, but it was kind of what I wanted to do at that time. And I kind of got my sort of breath of fresh air just from the buzz of being at at a stadium on a match day. Nothing really compares to it. So I really dove headfirst into that space generally, and really enjoyed it. Learned as much as I could about the sports betting industry at that time. It was really fortunate timing for me, seeing how things have obviously evolved over in the US and Canada, for sure.
Yeah, and the point I want to make is for everybody watching and listening, especially if you are a certain athlete or graduating now, the story that Dan just shared, where Dan, you literally started, you made your own fate, you started at the bottom, you literally put in the work, you made sacrifices, but that's what allowed you to be where you are today. And I think it's so important to understand that unless you put in the sacrifice, put in the work, you're never truly going to get to your goal. So it's okay to spend a few years and not party, as you did at Brock, as you did in London. It's okay to miss out on a few sports games because something is more important in your life than other things. So I think that's a great story that I think everybody watching and listening can learn from, including, it's always a great reminder for me as well to make sure I continue to do. So I love these types of stories, Dan. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no worries. And I would say it's incredibly important to work hard and take risks generally. And maybe the initial few years might have some bumps in the road where you're not paid what you think you should be paid, or what your friends are making doing this thing or that thing. But especially if you want to work in sports, which is a really competitive industry in general, you do have to make some of those sacrifices. But sort of a living example, I guess, not to toot my own horn, of it sort of being able to pay off. If you make those calculated risks and jump at the right time, then opportunities will present themselves. And from my time in the UK, I sort of made sure that I was able to parlay that, to use a betting term, into something greater. Ended up moving to Vancouver, working for the online sportsbook at playnow.com, which is the BC Lottery Corporation sportsbook. Again, did that for a couple of years, learned a lot of things, saw that my ambitions, at least on the sporting side, sort of superseded what the organization wanted to do, at least at that time. Maybe things have changed. And then in 2015, it was pretty impossible not to see DraftKings pretty much everywhere. DraftKings and FanDuel combined spent about $1 billion in advertising. So they were pretty much everywhere. And I just remember watching a game, probably a hockey game or something, like, that company looks cool. Like, they look like they're doing what I think I probably want to do. And it was crazy. Things moved really quickly. I feel like I reached out to someone on LinkedIn, had a call the next day, flew to Boston the next day, had a job offer the next day. It was awkward in that I just proposed to my wife, and I was like, so I'm going to move to Boston. But again, it was one of those things where it's like, I'm going to make a calculated risk here. Yeah. If it works out, amazing. If it doesn't, I can always go back. I joined DraftKings in October of 2015 or September of 2015, I guess. Lived in Boston for a little while. My wife, or fiance at the time, remained in Vancouver, but did what we had to do to make it work. And no regrets, obviously, at this stage.
2 words: go getter. That's it. Just get it done. So Dan, how do you apply So now, taking all the concepts that you've learned in sports by being an athlete, watching sports, working in sports, how have you applied these concepts to your career? So let's say strategy, execution, working with people. What has that journey been like? And do you use a lot of the sports examples in your career as a CEO today?
Yeah, I mean, and it certainly doesn't hurt. Like working in the sporting arena, I'm surrounded by a lot of like-minded folks who have played sports or love sports. So we're able to use a lot of the methodologies, I guess, from the sporting arena and apply them to the way that we operate. And, I would say that some of the principles that I think are the most important that I apply from, becoming an athlete. The biggest one to me is like organization and discipline. I mean, you're sort of taught that at a really, really early age, that you have to be on time. Even it's kind of silly in hindsight, but like, playing rep hockey, like you got to be dressed up, you got to look the part for what it is that you want to do or where you want to get to. Some of those small things, while they seem small, can actually matter and add up over the course of time. So I think that's a really big one for me. And the second one is just like teamwork and collaboration. I'm in general a big proponent of sort of flat organizations and being accountable and being sort of teamwork focused and not asking anyone to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do. I think is really, really important, especially in a leadership role. And that's important to me. Like I don't ever want to be someone's boss. I want to be their teammate who leads them. And I think that's really important to think about. And an obvious one from having been fortunate enough to be in leadership positions within sports on the field of play. Like, if your teammates dogging, that's on you as a leader to get them going. And if they mess up and the ball's in the back of the net, like, that's an X against everybody. And so making sure that the whole group's coming along with you and getting buy-in, setting goals, all of these things that it's funny, like at an early age playing hockey specifically. I mean, hockey in the GTA, Greater Toronto area as a youth is bananas. I mean, it's like ultra competitive. There's lots of dollars involved, and you get really early access to some pretty interesting principles as it pertains to like goal setting, how to set strategy, how to be smart, how to train, how to think about the long game, all these things that now going forward, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's really actually valuable, that you got to get your most important things done first thing in the morning, because that's when you're at your best and you're going to put in the best effort for it. Don't wait till the end of the day. All these types of things they're small, but they add up over the course of time.
You said a really interesting thing about if somebody on your team is not pulling their weight, it's on you. So, I see a lot of companies today that a lot of folks are, it's finger pointing. It's like, well, it's not my job. It's his person or her job, or I don't care. I'm here for my paycheck. But I think that's a wrong approach, because over time, the business is going to suffer. So what do you do, or what advice do you have, Dan, when there is somebody on your team that isn't pulling their weight, maybe from soccer or from actually in your business career? How do you fix that? How do you get somebody to come with you on the journey?
Right. Yeah. I mean, openly, you have to have the tough conversations. Generally, sometimes the result is it's not a good fit. And that's a really difficult conversation. I would say generally, again, and working in sports, I've been very fortunate that, and especially at a company like DraftKings, and the same is said with SIS, there are a lot of really motivated, talented, passionate individuals that I'm privy to work with that aren't. It's not too hard to pull them along. You can have these tough conversations, but generally you'll work to find the right medium and help them along in that journey. And I think it's really, really important to be super mindful of the fact that we all are humans, and that there can be a lot of things going on in someone's life. And maybe at that moment, whatever that project or that initiative or work in general, like it's just not a priority for them at that moment relative to what they had a kid or whatever, their grandma's sick or something like that. And being able to break down some of those barriers and have an open conversation, I think is really important. Again, there are moments where, you end up in the scenario where maybe it's just not the right fit. Maybe the culture here is not appropriate for what we're trying to do. Maybe our goals, extend beyond what it is that someone else's goals might be. And that's totally fine. And we should be happy or open to that. But I think, confronting it head on is obviously hypercritical. the earlier you can do it, certainly the better.
Yes, it's always, a lot of people avoid conflict, and that's not the answer if you want to win. If you want a winning team, it's best for you and for the other person as well. Have that honest conversation.
Right, right. Otherwise, things just sort of bubble beneath the surface, and then
explode.
it
Yeah.
gets ugly. Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, what advice do you have for executives today, Dan? You're leading a big company, you come from a big company. Pandemic has really taken a toll. Things are going to be different forever in some way, shape, or form. We are coming out of the pandemic. What is your advice to executives today of medium-sized, large businesses on how do you thrive in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one for me, and I was fortunate to be a part of DraftKings along for the ride and learning from executives like Jason Robbins and the leadership group there, who were amazing. I mean, it was not a smooth ride for a group like DraftKings at all. Like, from the second week that I joined there was potential that we were going to get shut out in New York and Nevada and all these different places, and that the business basically stopped growing for about 2 years at that moment. And then, the rocket ship sort of was able to take off again. What was really impactful to not just myself, but the entire organization, and this is one of the things that I've now carried on onto SIS, is like, be as transparent and communicative as you possibly can, especially with sort of the younger groups coming up out of school and whatnot. Like, they're used to far more touch points than maybe what we'll call legacy businesses used to provide.
Yeah.
Far less hierarchy, a lot more autonomy, flatter organizations, but you have all these incredible tools to be communicative and transparent. And I think that's really important. That's one of the things that I've really leaned into in my early days at SIS. And already we're seeing incredible value because, once you break down some of the silos and make sure everyone's understanding, what is our mission? What is our vision? What's the strategy? How are we going to get there? How does my role play a part in what we're ultimately trying to do?
Exactly.
That's incredibly impactful because it empowers individuals to then go and perform at the highest level that they possibly can. When folks are acting or working in the dark, so to speak, it becomes demotivating, it becomes challenging. Every single person wants to do well. Like at a baseline, like everyone wants to accomplish something in every given day. I truly believe that. You need to empower individuals as a leader to get there. And I think transparency and communication is really, really essential to help them achieve that goal.
Absolutely. Especially in a world where social media is everywhere. I think the big difference is that we see behind closed doors now. We know what things are like. There's no more secrecy anymore. So it makes no sense to do things behind closed doors. I think being vulnerable as leadership is a strength, at least, So
yeah, 100%. It's funny, hearing some of the stories, especially from folks at SIS who have worked on the professional sports side, and like they'll hear stories about their friends getting laid off from like listening to it on the radio, and that's just not appropriate. Like, I mean, there's got to be better ways of communicating. Not to say that pro sports teams are not like progressive, they certainly are, but there's still a lot of room to grow in that vein, broadly across a lot of industries. I would say groups like DraftKings, ultra progressive, with SIS, we're going to look to do a lot of the same. And I think it's going to be to, individuals' value or benefit in the organization, but also to the broader organization as well, because we'll be
awesome
chugging along in the same direction that way.
Well, lots of success to you and SIS, Dan, so far. Really excited to see your progress.
Thank you.
Where can everyone learn, get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, so we have a website. It's www.sportsinfosolutions.com. I will say we're undergoing a bit of a brand refresh and a website redesign. So in around a month and a half, in and about of the NBA draft, we'll be looking to relaunch that product and hopefully make a splash. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find. I have a fairly unique name, I suppose. Happy to have conversations with anyone by and large. So yeah.
Awesome. Dan, Hannigan-Daley, thank you again for jumping on. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
No worries. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.